So we know.
It's usually got a
So
beer.
we know.
Real nice.
Before, and so definitely my body disappeared. Well, I worked in the 24-hour I did it this time around. That was the end of it. Give me a break. Yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah. Oh, yours is doing
We're expecting a high number over here, so please either help people find a place to sit, move, or anything that so we can get people in faster.
Same one. Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to our last presentation of the day. We've had an enjoyable day today. So we are super excited to have one of our own, Doran Williams and his wife, talk to us today. So just some information about them. Shannon Williams has worked with students of various disabilities for over 30 years. She earned a master's in special education and has spent the majority of her years teaching in secondary education. Her favorite job has been as a transition specialist helping students with disabilities move on to higher education and employment. She currently serves on the Governor's Committee for Employment with People with Disabilities. She is the mother of 4 amazing children and loves to work in her yard and create art. Doran Williams is married to a wonderful wife and is the father of 4 adopted biracial children who have brought much growth, challenges, and love to their home. Doran received his master's degree from BYU in social work in 1988 and has worked for Wasatch Behavioral Health since 1988. Doran has worked in a variety of programs such as adult day treatment and adult and youth outpatient department. He was a program manager over intensive residential treatment, or IRT, inpatient, hospital, jail, and after-hours crisis services for approximately 8 years. He was the director of Children and Family Services for approximately 6 years. Doran is currently the Associate Director, Corporate Compliance Officer, and Chief Operating Officer. So, welcome to Doran and Shannon.
So you're probably all wondering, why is she here, right? I'll be honest, as an educator, I was thinking this morning, I'm like, I've probably given thousands of lessons or presentations or whatever over the years, but I have to tell you, this is the scariest one I've ever done. Yeah, I look at all of your faces and I know that you're the most kind-hearted people on the planet, and so that I really don't have any reason to worry. And so why am I here? They asked me if I would come and tell my story about my life experience with mental illness. I have given a couple presentations when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and that wasn't so hard because the diagnosis is fairly well accepted and understood in the community. I, however, was re-diagnosed a year ago. And I'm not going to tell you what that diagnosis is. I'm going to have you put your social worker hats on and see if you can kind of figure it out while I'm speaking. And Doran, although he's a social worker, he's here to help in the latter part of my presentation to talk about his lived experience as being a spouse with someone with mental illness. If you want to talk that up. And I want to tell you too, I'm shaking, so I hope some of you know CPR in here. I don't usually get nervous. One of my passions with teaching kids with special needs is helping them become independent. And so a lot of the things I'm going to speak about today are helping people with chronic mental illness gain independence. So if you can put the next slide. So these are the three things that I hope that you'll come away with, at least one little tidbit of something that you can take and put into your practice. Empowering your clients with, and do call them clients. They're not, okay, I want to make sure I'm using the right verbiage. With their hospital experience. The second one is to help them understand their diagnosis, which will give them more skills to be independent. And then creating a wellness plan. I like the word safety plan, but I think a safety plan is also a wellness plan to help prevent future suicide attempts. I am used to like the little mics, and so I have my notes here. I can't hold them up coordinated enough to hold them to. So I don't think I had a mental illness when I was younger. I don't remember any anxiety or anything like that. But I think the first time, that I remember anything was when we adopted our first daughter. After about 2 weeks after the adoption, I remember feeling super depressed, and I thought, I've heard people that give birth to children that have postpartum. Could that be happening to me? But it can't be happening to me because I didn't give birth to this child. So I talked to some of my friends, and they were like, yeah, I've heard of that before. So I kind of just wrote it off as that. And I don't really remember how it resolved, but it must not have been too significant because I don't remember much after that. I think I'm going to have to stay over here, where my notes are. And then the second time I remembered something was in 1993. I had been working part-time as a parent-infant advisor as a deafblind specialist, and our job consisted of driving to homes with families that had children with deafblindness and providing services in their homes. I remember that I was dealing with some depression at that time, didn't really know why, and as I would go on these trips, everything along the road I would have suicidal ideation as I was driving along the road. And I didn't want to die, but these random thoughts would just kind of pound my brain as I was driving. Just prior to that, I had had hysterectomy, so I had major surgery. And I also, we adopted another child, our third child. And maybe those are kind of clues as you're trying to figure out what diagnosis I just recently received. But one of those times when I was getting ready to drive to one of my appointments, I knew that I wouldn't come back. And I had the strength to call a friend and ask her if she would go with me. And she came over and she's like, no, I'm not going with you. You're going to the doctor. And Doran was out of town at the time. And so I really am grateful for her intervention in my life at that time. And then I got some treatment. I didn't get real, I stabilized, but I was never really well. Do you have any of that water? Then 4 years ago in 2016, excuse me. Honestly, I don't know why I wasn't nervous. In 2016, we had, just prior to that, I lost three significant people in my life. One of them was my mother of cancer, and then the next one, I lost my brother to suicide. And then my 99-year-old grandpa, he died of TMB. Do you know what that is? You do? Too many birthdays, yeah. He used to always say, I'm gonna die of TMB, and he was 99, and he surely did die of TMB. And so that was, even though we did well with it, it's hard. And then right after that, I had a student who took his life the first day of school. And I'm sorry, it's not going to be depressing like this all the time. It's just a story so that you understand the background. I lost a student the very first day of school, and then 10 days later, another student. And then I had 3 weddings in 9 months. So you can imagine what that was like. But during that time, I progressively became more and more depressed. But at the same time, I was doing more and more exercise. Like I was going to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, and I was doing Zumba the other nights of the week. And don't laugh, but this old lady was boxing too. So anyway, so I was doing all of that stuff while I was chronically depressed. And at that time too, the ideations became worse and worse, to the point where everything in my environment that I walked by, I could see some way that I could take my life. But even with that, I didn't want to die, but my brain just kept pounding all these different things of how I could die. I always wondered why my brother could, or anyone could take their life. I could never put myself in their brain of like, how could someone get to that point that they would be willing to take their life. And one day when I was on the treadmill, the treadmills at the gym are facing my workplace. I was teaching at the high school. And I sat there and I was just looking at the high school, and I had the thought, a very calm thought, that I should take my life because I would be saving lives. Because people knew me in the community because I taught at the high school, and if they saw that it could happen to someone like me, it could happen to me. My brain totally switched into something that I never have been before. And now that I look back, I can see why people are able to do that, because your brain actually switches and you think things that you would never think before. We had talked about, I was in treatment, I'd gone to a psychiatrist, nothing was helping, medication wasn't helping. And we'd even talked about the hospital, but we're kind of like, well, what's the hospital going to do more than just what I was already doing? So at that point, we decided not to go. But I knew day by day, I didn't know how much longer I could be around. I started doing things like crocheting. I have this huge blanket that I crochet that still isn't finished, but I would crochet because it would keep my mind quiet. And then when it was getting really bad, I would wear headphones all the time because the music, for some reason, would keep my brain quiet. Anything that I could do to distract myself kept it quiet just for that little bit of time. And you know what's funny is when I was working, I didn't have struggles. You would think that it would be hard to hide at work. I didn't have any trouble, because why? Because it gave me purpose and it kept my brain quiet. I don't know if any of you have worked with special needs kids, but they keep me busy. and you're like trying to keep this kid from not hitting the other kid and this kid from not doing whatever. So you're constantly busy, and it would keep my mind distracted, so I didn't have ideation. And then we were just talking about this at lunch. Our school has this Fan of the Week award, and a student gets it. It's kind of like everybody aspires to be like Fan of the Week at our school. Well, I was the first adult to get Fan of the Week. And little did they know, the reason I was at every game, every concert, every anything is what? Keep my brain quiet. So when Doran wasn't home and I was having a lot of ideation, I'd go to a baseball game or a football game or whatever I could to keep my mind quiet. And I'll talk a little bit about my safety plan. Then one day I went to therapy, and I knew I was going on a trip, and I knew I wouldn't come home. I just knew I couldn't go on anymore because those thoughts in my head were just so relentless, like they never stopped. And so as I left my therapist later, she told me, she says, I didn't think you were ever coming back. And I went home, and I might get a little tearful in this. It's my sweet angels in the audience. I went home, I was packing my stuff, and nobody was at the house because everybody moved out. And I knew I wasn't coming back. And my daughter walked in, And she's like, what is wrong with you? Like, what's going on? And I hadn't told them at that time what was happening. And I shared what I was going through. I just dumped it all. And she just looked at me. And with her piercing eyes, she just looked at me and she says, you know what you need to do. And I hadn't had the courage to go to the hospital because I worried about the stigma. I really didn't know what it was like. And so I had really pushed hard against doing that. Now you hear people, I know in my profession you hear like 10 minutes saves a life. Have you heard that? No. Well, in education, a lot of times they say 10 minutes will save a life. Well, for me, that was true. Those 10 minutes that she intervened got me on a course and stopped me from something that I shouldn't do. I worry about talking about that because you don't want to put that pressure on families, because then that they just want to, if something does happen, like, well, what if I would have been there for that 10 minutes? I could have saved a life. So I worry about sharing that, but for me, it did save my life. So I just got into bed, I crawled into bed, and I texted my therapist, and I texted Doran, and like, I need to go to the hospital. So what I want to talk about that hopefully will be helpful for you is to talk about my hospital experience. My only experience with psychiatric hospitalization was TV, movies. What do you see in the movies? Like, what is going to the psych unit like?
Nurse Ratchet.
And what's that?
Nurse Ratchet. The nurse that harasses and drives worse.
Okay. I'm not a big TV watcher, so. Anything else? What else do you envision?
Sterile halls and like people rocking back and forth and just outlandish behavior everywhere.
Exactly, and that's what I envision too. And I'm like, oh, I was very scared to go. Just gonna hold this that I was thinking. So I want to tell you the things that were different for me that I wish somebody would have told me. Now, as I say this, as I started preparing this, I got to thinking, when would you actually prepare a client for hospitalization? Do you always have notice? No. So just raise your hand. Like, I'm really curious, how could you prepare a client for possible hospitalization? Like, when would you do that? Yeah.
My thought is, if you had someone where you had the clinical knowledge that they were moderately or severely depressed, probably early on, it would be good to just have a broad conversation where you say, this is my familiarity with your severity of depression.
I like that.
And these are things that work and have helped people, and I've had other people who have struggled, I've had people die. And you say, if I ever feel or believe, that your life's in danger, I would recommend you to a hospital, and here's the reasons why. And you say, I don't know if we'll ever need it or not, but sometimes it does help people. And then I would say, well, my brother's a psychiatrist, and he's been able to help some people, and this is a tough struggle, but it would be a broad conversation.
That's a good way to put it. So it's not like you are going to the hospital, but if this does happen, I want to make sure you're prepared. The things that were different that I didn't expect, and one thing that I would maybe talk to your clients about is when I went in, one of my issues is burdening people or people thinking that I'm making something up. I don't ever want people to think I'm trying to get attention. And so when you go into the hospital, of course, you meet with a social worker and they ask you what's wrong and what's going on. And it was my immediate reaction to just minimize what was going on. And so clients really need to tell their truth, because that's how they're going to get help. And so I wish somebody would have told me that, because I felt very silly that like telling it all, and was it okay to tell it all? And then another weird thing is they put you in a wheelchair and they take you up to the unit. well, I'm able-bodied, why would they put me in a wheelchair? And if someone would have just said, hey, this is just kind of protocol for the hospital, if it happens, just go with it, that would have made it easier. And none of these are big things, but if someone would have prepared me for them as a whole, it would have made my experience so much easier. The other thing, I think one of you guys, I think you alluded to this, of the different type of clientele that are in the hospital. So my roommate, I think she had borderline personality. She had been in there several weeks and was talking about having to go to the hospital. The lady next to me had postpartum. There was a young man down a few doors that was young and was dealing with suicidality. There were just like all different kinds of people there, and there was no one like she described rocking or we were just all regular people trying to get better. I do have to say though that there was one night, and I've never heard the word used before, but you guys probably hear it all the time, 3 cots in a cot. Have you heard that before? We did have one guy who was there for that reason. When he came in late at night. He was just glad to eat a dinner, and he was gone the next morning. And so I know there are some people that go just to get free food in the bed. Another thing I wasn't prepared for is the things they take away from you and the things that they give you. Some of my clothes, because they were a possible method of taking your life, they had to take away. They gave me a little black comb, those ones you used to get a long time ago when you were younger, and a little thing of Johnson's baby shampoo. And that was it. And you don't want to scare clients, but maybe let them know that that's normal and it's okay because everybody's going to look the same. You're all going to have the same stuff. Activities. I just assume that people just sit in there and they wait for the doctor to come and give them medicine or whatever. But they have activities, and your group therapy, and you're meeting with your psychiatrist, and individual therapy. You don't have any downtime. So that was something I wish I knew. This part, I think, when I talked to Doran about this, I think this is one of the things that he wanted me to really talk about, and that was the discharge. We've been talking about heavy stuff, so I have to tell you a funny story. So Doran said that he used to work with the unit at the hospital. When they were wheeling me in at night, I told the nurse, because I saw her name tag and I'd heard him talk about this nurse and how much he loved her. And I looked up to the nurse, I'm like, my husband loves you, by the way. And so, I was there about a week. And as it came time for discharge, he comes, they were having group, and so they went into my room to be able to do all the discharge papers. And this nurse, when she recognized Doran, she's like, oh my gosh, all this time I was scared of you because I thought you were delusional and you were going to kill me because your husband loved me. It was a great moment. And I hope this isn't too much information, but I'll back up a little bit. When you go into the hospital, you're so scared to go in there. But when you leave, you're more scared. Why would you be more scared?
You're on your own.
Because you're on your own again, yeah.
The unknown. It's like you don't know what's going to happen or who's going to come back.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't feel safe because and those things and not feeling safe. And so I was scared to leave. In fact, as I left, and when I was writing this brought back a lot of emotion. We were walking out the door, everyone was kind of ahead of me, and I looked down, and I looked at the shirt that I had on. And I remembered that when I put on that shirt, I thought, this is the shirt that I want to die in. And so when I walked out and I was supposedly better and I looked down at that shirt, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I ready? And then we go outside and everything seemed like the sun, it was a cloudy day too. It was a little bit rainy and the sun was so bright and the tires, the sound of the tires on the road were so loud. It was almost overwhelming. And that's one of the things I think I would really prepare clients for is when you're in that controlled environment and then all of a sudden you're out in the world again, that it's normal to feel that way. I thought I was really abnormal, but the more I've talked to people, it's a super normal experience. I didn't want to be with people for a while because that was super overwhelming. So he would take me to the store at like 11 o'clock at night, and we'd walk around. And the first time that we went to a store, I'm like, okay, good, I'm not going to know anyone. And then there was a gal I hadn't seen in years, and I saw her coming down the aisle, and I go down this aisle. Anyway, she did find me, but it was an experience to do that. So I think that is a really important thing to tell your clients, that is normal. I wish, like when I made my appointment for the psychiatrist, it took me a month before I could get an appointment. That's way too long, especially since my meds weren't really working quite right, nor did I even have the right meds. I wish, even though I had a therapist coming right out of the hospital, I wish I would have had a support person. I thought more intensive therapy, but as I was talking to Doran, he had a better idea that's probably a lot more cost effective, and that's maybe where his administrative stuff comes in, I don't know. But if I would have had maybe a peer support person who would check in with me every single day, maybe not even meet with me, but just check in with me, along with my therapy, my transition would have been so much more successful. So if there's any way that you can hook people up, either with volunteers or somebody that's within your agency, I think that also increases the ability for people to be successful post hospital. I wrote really big, so if you see a bunch of papers, it's just because I wrote really big. For a moment, I would like Doran to talk, and he's going to share his experience not as a social worker, but as a family member. What it's like to be a husband or a family member with a person in the hospital.
It's weird being on the other side of the table, folks. Especially where I was at. I was quote the guru of inpatient. But it was, and you really start to really think of your stigma. Not only external stigma, but internal. Where are you at personally? Where can you stand? What can you do if your wife goes into inpatient and has a mental illness? Where do you physically stand? How do you take it? As well as what are others going to think? And the other thing that comes in that she really taught me was, most of us, when we think we go into the hospital, when we come out, we're fixed and we're better, right? But not for mental health. For mental health, all we do is get to a plane where then we can go do the hard work outpatient, right? It's not like if I had surgery of some sort, I walk out, I'm pretty healed. Or a broken arm that can cast. So part of it is to really help the family understand, one, how they can support the individual. And it really depends on the relationship you have with that individual. I had to really trust my wife. I had to believe when she said, hey, I'm doing good, I'm not doing good today. And to be able to understand and rely on that trust, to be able to help her and support her at that point. And so it really becomes, what can you do as a family member to be part of that recovery process? And get rid of your own biases, your own fears. What are they going to think of me? Does that mean I'm a bad husband? I'm a bad father? Where does that fit? What does it do? And so you really have to take some internal inventory. She's one of my heroes. And I'm grateful she stood up and is doing this presentation today. Because I think I've learned a lot. As we look on the other side, it's easy as a client to send your client in and go on. It's different when it's your wife, that you take her in and drop her off the hospital, then you leave and go home. And then when you can go visit for an hour, and to see where she's at, and knowing what else is going on the unit. Is it a calm unit? Is it a crazy unit? Based on the clientele that are there. you begin to wonder if my protective part comes in and say, okay, how can I protect her? What can I do to help relieve some of her concerns and fears? And so it really helped us draw closer together and really get rid of my own ego, my own concerns, and to be able to deal with what's going on currently.
I know this is getting a little off track, but I forgot a funny story. When I was in there, my therapist came to come see me, and they took us into the room where you play pool and stuff, the activity room, and we couldn't get out. And so we pushed the button to talk on the mic. It was like, I don't know, like a code blue type thing. I don't know what it was. People came running from everywhere when I was up there. So I'm just curious. I will tell you my diagnosis, and then I want you to tell me if you guessed it. Oh yeah, we had that slide. Oh well. My diagnosis, oh wait, no, one more thing, sorry, I want to get to that. Yeah, so fast forward a couple of years, actually it was just a year ago. A year ago, December, I also have multiple sclerosis, and so that's why I get a little shaky when I get nervous. And I can't take the medication, and so they decided to give me a steroid infusion. After that infusion, I had the best mental health ever. My therapist is like, man, you need to live on these things because you're awesome right now. It's so stable. About a month and a half after my infusion, I crashed. And the ideation was so bad. My therapist said, you need to call your neurologist and get another infusion. What do you think my neurologist said? No way. And I think he knew that, steroids can sometimes affect mental health. And he's like, no, you need to call your psychiatrist. But by the time I had called him, I had a plan. And when he said, no, call your psychiatrist, I'd already been to the psychiatrist. I didn't think that there was any way out. And so I remember exactly, I was on the freeway, and when he told me, no, as I was driving home, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live in this hell in my brain where everything I see in my environment tells me that I should die. And thank goodness, I think because of our background and being in education, all those things, I had so many resources. I had the strength to be able to go just a little bit more. But I can't help but think about all those people that don't have those resources. They don't know that there's hope out there. I was one of the lucky ones, and thank goodness I was able to get into my psychiatrist, and she's just like, and she was like, I don't have her now because she's moved, but she was like the weed queen. So every time I came in, she's like, got some stuff in my drawer for you. Anyway, she was awesome. But anyway, but she had tried lots of things with me and nothing helped. Although after my first hospital episode, I forgot to tell you this, Abilify was the only thing that helped me. So that'll give you another clue of what my diagnosis is. And then this time she's like, oh my gosh, now we know what you have. And I said, what's that? She's like, you have bipolar. And you guessed it. I'm like, so how did you guess bipolar? Oh, because you're bipolar. Yeah, and the media, I had misconceptions about bipolar because all I knew was from the media. And when I was diagnosed with that, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But my mother had bipolar. My brother had bipolar, and he died by suicide. And the doctors still didn't pick it up. I lived 40 years of my life with medication that did not work, that sometimes even made me worse. But as soon as they put me on Abilify, or in the last situation, put me on Seroquel, all the ideations, within 24 hours, my ideations went away. Things that I've been fighting for months to go away, and that medication helped me. 24 hours, and I know that doesn't happen to everyone, but for me it did. And I guess when I consented to do this presentation, I wasn't going to talk about bipolar because I'm scared to tell people I have bipolar because of the stigma. And after months of thinking about it, I'm like, I need to have the courage to do it because I think that's the only way we'll dispel this. So from my own self-taught situation, I think I have bipolar 2. Is that the one with hypomania? Yeah. So it didn't get picked up because I don't have the extreme mania. I have hypomania. But another clue should have been I was working, teaching high school. I'd also been hired at another high school simultaneously to help open up a new high school. I was a leader in a youth church group. I had 4 teenagers, and in the middle of it, I decided to open a business to sell gymnastics wear. I don't do gymnastics. Like, my daughter did, but I still didn't know anything about gymnastics. And in the middle of the recession, it was 2008. So, do you think they should have caught bipolar at that point? Anyway, but they didn't. And I'm not upset at anyone, but I just can't help but think what my life would have been like had I known. And my poor kids, they're still functional, like even with the mom. Anyway, so when I was, So when I was first diagnosed, I didn't know much about bipolar, and I was very surprised that the professionals around me didn't know a lot about bipolar. They knew the basics, but they really didn't know as much as I wanted to know. And so I asked my psychiatrist one day, I said, how can I learn more about bipolar? And he's like, I don't know. And so like during our visit, he gets on Amazon and starts looking at reviews of books on bipolar. And I have to tell you, have you guys seen this book before? It's called the Bipolar Disorder Survival Guide, What You and Your Family Need to Know. So it's not just for people with bipolar, but it's also for families. It's by, I'll just spell it, I see some of you writing. It's David, Miklowitz. I've lent it to a few of my friends with bipolar, and they, within like reading a couple chapters, went and bought a new one. So for themselves. The reason I bring this up is I think that one of the things that's helped keep me healthier and keep me from having more episodes that bring me closer to a place I don't want to be is by understanding my disorder. Things I didn't know that are so simple are routines. With bipolar, routines are so vital when you go to sleep at night, when you get up in the morning, and being proactive in your own care. And so I asked Doran if it was okay for me to share this, but many of you already know this. A month and a half ago, he was diagnosed with cancer. And although I kind of felt guilty inside, because although I knew that I would be busy, like being by his side, I also knew I needed to take care of me and my bipolar. Because if I couldn't do that, then I couldn't help him. So I called my psychiatrist up and I'm like, hey, I've got this going on in my life. We need to look at meds, maybe upping, my Lamictal, which is my mood stabilizer, and seeing if that will keep me in a place that I can still take care of him if he needs that. And if you don't know the outcome, he's kind of got a little less of a finger now. He had a rare cancer in his fingernail. And they think they got it all. They're going to monitor him for the next 5 years. But I felt guilty for thinking about myself during the time when he was the one with this serious issue. But I think our clients need to know that it's okay. Like, you need to take care of yourself so that you can be helpful to your families. This book also talks about how to go and talk to your physicians about medication. And I thought that, for me, I feel confident in that, but as I was talking to a friend the other day, they were just in that stage, and they were like, what do I talk to my doctor about? How do I, what medication should I be asking about? Another way to be proactive, and I know there may be some people that may disagree with me, but I find that social media groups, if you find the right one, it can be really helpful. But you can also find some bad ones that are just, they're whining all the time, or it's really very negative. And so I'm really careful and make sure that I get on a group. I had tried several anxiety medications, none of them worked. And so I just got on one of my social media bipolar groups and I said, hey, what are you guys taking for anxiety? Because I didn't want to take the benzos because I just didn't want to. I've got 2 siblings with, that had addictions. Well, that's not the right word. Substance abuse disorder. And I just didn't want to be in that place. And somebody said, yeah, it's like an antihistamine. Oh my gosh, it's a dream for me. And I got that off of a support group. And so maybe those are some places that you can direct your clients, but help them to understand which ones are good. And it's okay to get off one and get on another one because there's so many out there. What are some resources that you direct your clients to help them promote their own self-awareness of their own diagnosis so that they can take care of themselves? Yes.
I mean, I've opened up the DSM with clients, they're like, hey, I've been diagnosed with this, I don't even know what it means. So I've sat down with clients and said, well, here's what the DSM says, and just try to educate them more about what their diagnosis means. A lot of times they really don't know.
It helps a lot. One thing that I had to tease out was before I was diagnosed with bipolar, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And so I was on Adderall or something, I don't know what I was on. But anyway, for a little while, and I always told him, I'm like, I don't think I have ADHD. I think I would have known it a long time ago when I was a kid. And in this book, they tease that out. They're like, a lot of times people with bipolar are diagnosed with ADHD when they really don't have it. It's just a form of the mania. And so in this book, I was able to look and see, okay, I don't have ADHD. It really helped me. I could talk to my therapist and doctor about it. So knowing how to take care of myself and to look ahead really helped with my own self-advocacy and staying well and staying stable. Do you want to go to the next section? Some of the things my therapist did that were really helpful for me to stop the ideation was, I'm a very visual person, and so she kind of like had a picture of a slide, and she's like, imagine in your brain you have a slide, and every time you have a thought like hit your head, or come into your mind, you just let it slide. And so I could, every time something happened, I was like, let it slide, let it slide. And so visualization really helped a lot with me. And I also talk back to my thoughts. Maybe you think that's crazy, but I would just, when a thought would come in, I'd just like envision myself just talking back at it, saying, you don't belong here. And just, and believe it or not, it works for me. I can just yell at it and say, you don't belong here. I don't know if you want to do this, but it's been extremely helpful for me. I've had 2 therapists that have allowed me to email them. Every time my brain gets so busy with things it shouldn't be busy with, writing is a huge help for me, but I don't like to write in journals because I feel like it's permanent. Somebody could find it, and I don't want anyone to know those thoughts that are in my head. And so both of my therapists have said, you can email me anytime. They never respond. I never expect them to read it. But for me to be able to get it out of my head, onto my computer, and then I send it into outer space. For me, it's very freeing, and it kind of calms me down and lets me think through those thoughts and be able to get grounded again. So if you have clients that you trust that really don't care if you read it and don't respond, like it kind of freaks me out, I think, when they respond, because then it makes it real that someone's on the other end. But it's very helpful for me. This one, I'm still working on. When you have been suicidal before, some of your coping techniques actually become triggers when you get out of the hospital. So when I pick up that crocheting, I haven't finished it because it reminds me of the place I was when I was doing it. There are things in my environment that I had ideations about that are still in my house. And I felt I've had to work through my fear of being around those things. So my therapist has taught me, this is what I do, is I like ground in the present, which is just looking around and trying to like see something besides that thought in my head. And then I ask myself, is this something I really want to do? And the answer is always no, because no, I don't want to die. And so I can say, no, it's not something that I want to do. And then I ask myself, am I safe still being around it? Or do I need to remove myself or the object? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then I'm safe. And so I'm feeling like I have more power. Because when you have bipolar, at least for me, I'm just speaking for myself, I don't feel in control. Like I feel, because of the impulsivity of the mania, that sometimes I might do something that I didn't really want to do. And so I'm in constant fear that I'm going to do something that I didn't want to do. So this helps me feel like I'm in control. So when I have that thought, I can be in control. Now I want to show you my wellness plan. Now, just so you know, I'm like a math nerd. I like spreadsheets, all this kind of stuff. So this is my plan. And as you look at it, I want you to know that you could take some of the parts and maybe put it in for things with your clients, because I'm sure it won't work with them as it works for me. Do you want to go to the next one? So I have 5 stages. So just to tell you, this is going to like go across with different columns that will represent where I am at. So I feel bad for you guys. I'm like the last one, and you've been sitting all day. I wish we could like do toes or something. So the top, well, I'll just go down the side right here. So this is, like I said, my plan for independence. I tried to put as many things in here that I could do on my own. The reason why is because I remember those safety plans from years ago where we'd have the kids sign, who are your 3 people that you contact if you get in a bad place? If you have a chronic mental illness, will that work? No. First of all, your 3 people aren't equipped to handle that. And second of all, you can't, as many times in a day that you have struggles, you can't be calling them all the time. For me, I have rapid cycling. And so sometimes I cycle between serious depression and mania like 3 or 4 times a day. Yes, he is a saint. So here are some of the things that I do. So this first one is super like primary answer, kindergarten answer. Increase my water intake. That's probably one of my #1 things that can make me healthy. Adequate sleep, regular exercise, eat well, take my meds, and limit screen time. The next one is stay busy. Well, let's just do this one. So if I'm just having intermittent anxiety and depression, my emotions are just kind of up and down, and I watch a commercial and I'm bawling my eyes out for no reason. I can tell that I'm kind of like on the edge of things. Then I just do that. Super simple. Okay, next one. Yeah. So the same stuff, but I'm having these little bits of flickers of suicidal ideation. I'm going down the road, I see something, or I'm in my kitchen, I see something. Like, it's just weird stuff. I do the same stuff, but then I create a loose schedule for myself. Like, get up at this time, eat breakfast, I'm gonna clean this room, have lunch, and then I just kind of like map it out, but real loose. Kind of gives me some accountability, and it keeps me focused on the next step in my day, and it keeps me out of that place of, oh no, what's going to happen in the future? I don't do this here, but maybe your clients might need to. That's where I tell a trusted person. My trusted person is him. He doesn't freak out when I tell him. I'll just say, hey, it's one of those days I'm starting to have ideation again. The reason I do is for me. When I talked earlier about not trusting myself, I feel like if I get to a point where I'm not making good decisions, I know somebody already knows where I'm at and can step in and help me with those decisions. So, did you want to talk about what being my trusted person or not? Or did you kind of cover it before? Okay.
As you can hear, it's a fine dance that we end up doing with each other. And it literally is a dance. But I also have to have the trust with her that what she tells me is true, that she's going to be straight and honest with me. Okay? Because if I don't have that basic trust with her, then she'll say, hey, it's one of those days. Where are you at? Or, you know what, it's a good day. Things are good. Or I'm kind of going back and forth. And we have to build that trust with each other to know where things are at and what to respond. Because otherwise, I have a tendency either to respond too much or too little. Either my social work hat kicks in and I want to take over, or I all of a sudden say, okay, I got to back off. And it really is a dance, as I call it, to be able to figure out where we are together and what's going on. So the relationship has to be there, because she's got to be able to trust me that I'm not going to jump in and say, okay, I'm going to come be the cavalry and take over, because that's not her personality. If I push and she's not there, she's going to push back harder or go some other direction. So we really have to be able to be on the same page to say, okay, where are we at? What are we going to do? And have a good conversation about it and be honest with each other. The other part is it really has to be the ability without judgment. That yes, you can have those ideations. Yes, you can have a plan, but you're going to be honest with me. And I'm not judging you. You're not judging me. But together, we're going to work out a plan on what we need to do. If it needs to be that I need to call you in the middle of the day, do I need to text? Do you need to check in with me? Do I need to check in with you? Where are we at in our level here of this plan of wellness or a safety plan that's there? As she talks about the 3 people, she doesn't want to burn anybody else out. Okay? She often says, are you okay? She begins to worry about me and where I'm at. So I've often got to come back and say, hey, I'm okay. I'll let you know, I'm okay. So you really have to, I can't stress it on you. You got to have an honest and heartfelt conversation. It's pretty brutal at times and pretty honest. So that way you're both safe. And I'm not sitting worrying about whether I'm at work or gone somewhere else. And it's like, okay, am I going to come home and she's not going to be there? Then how am I going to react? What am I going to do? And so it really comes down to, I trust her when she tells me where she's at. I trust that she's honest with me. And we've had the conversations that go on. And so as a safety person, you've got to be able to not react. Because the first thing you do that, and then her says, well, I'm too much of a burden. I don't want to put this on him. And she'll back off, which most of our clients do. If somebody comes up and says something, whether you're suicidal, whatever, depending on how you react is whether they continue or whether they shut down. Because the last thing they want to do is dump everything onto you. And so oftentimes it's called, okay, Doran, take a deep breath. I don't have to respond immediately. And then we can have a conversation of where we're at. What are we going to do? What do we need to do? And so, as you said, we did many sports activities, plays. That was fun. But as she said, it gets her out with people. And if she's with other people in a gymnasium or a theater or something, that's less likely of things to occur to happen. And so also knowing what are my backups and what is my plan in the process. And so as we talk with families, and sometimes that's hard with families to say, okay, how do you not be judgmental? How do you not overreact? How do you not become too controlling? What can you do together to build that relationship so it's strong enough Because oftentimes it'll tear the relationship apart because it goes back and forth in cycles that's there. So it really is a fine dance to be able to build that relationship and to know where things are at. That's something we've been able to do. That's some growth we've had to do. And it's been up and down as we go along. So just as a safe person prospect and as a husband, it's different being on one side versus the other as a clinical side that's there.
I think if I were to sum it up, I'd say don't freak out. Yeah, because I know he's not going to freak out. He'll just check in at night. So, the next part. Wait, actually go back. So I don't do it there because I have some pretty good self-advocacy skills, but I would say a lot of people do need to tell a safe person. I'm in therapy at that point, which I think would consider this as being independent, because you are advocating for yourself and getting help. Medical intervention. Okay, go to the next one. There you go. This one is high anxiety, and it's not relieved by exercise. Exercise doesn't help, and I'm having a lot of ideation. The things that I would increase there is creating a more detailed schedule and share with a trusted person. So my therapist allows me to do that when it's really bad. If it's kind of in between, I'll email him my schedule, and sometimes it's down to the 15-minute mark. Like if my ideation is so bad, I literally have to book every 15 minutes and maybe just a couple hours at a time, but that is the only way that I can keep safe. I love this. I heard this by, he was actually my psychiatrist in the hospital, and now I think he works at Mountain View. But he has something called the Walmart rule. Have you guys heard of that before? Some of you? No? The Walmart rule is just be with people. If you're at Walmart, are you going to do something stupid? No, because you're with somebody and people are around, they see you, and so that was my go to the ball games rule. So that's something I could do independently. And then everything, I've added, that's my create the safe environment, because I know I'm not safe with things around me. And then the rest are the same, so go to the next one. This one is when I get to the point, like on the treadmill, where I've decided, I can't do this anymore, but I don't really have a plan at that point. That's when I add more frequent check-ins with my trusted person, maybe several times a day, to just make sure. I feel like if I check in, that it keeps me more on track. And then the last one. Once a plan starts formulating and I don't feel safe, that's, for me, the time for hospitalization. And that's what I didn't really know. Like, when should I go to the hospital? When I knew I couldn't be safe any other way, I think the hospital is a good place, because your family can't be there 24/7. And the emotional drain on them to be able to worry about you 24/7 and not get sleep is just too much to bear. And so that's when I think hospitalization is a good option. At least it was for me. Let's go to the last slide. And you guys are getting out early music. That's the best thing ever, right? So for me, these are kind of things I live by. Find joy in every day, and that may be something simple. It may be walking out and smelling the rain. It's just the stuff we can talk about all the time. But literally, I would make myself write something positive that I saw that day or the day before. And this one is great for me. I have to remember that this is only temporary. When you have anxiety, you feel like you just, life's over, you hurt, you physically hurt, and you can't see any way out. And then 2 hours later, it's gone. And so I've had that happen so many times that I have to remember that this is only temporary, and I've done hard things before. I have to tell you one thing that I missed in the last part. When I was talking about learning about your diagnosis, I didn't realize how much of my life was in hypomania. And we just had an experience when he was first diagnosed. with cancer. We had a family get together that day. I woke up that morning and I'm like, we need to plan a trip to France. I don't even like France. Like, I don't even know where I came up with that. And he's like, no, I don't think so. and I was just like, but we need to go somewhere. We need to do that. And it was all my routine. My life had been changed a little bit. And so I was kind of getting into that hypomania. And then the kids didn't know a whole lot about his situation at that point. And boy, did I have it all formulated in my brain. We've got to sit down. We're going to talk about this and this and this. And then he still had that look on his face. And kind of like the time that when I opened up the gymnastics business, I was going to like sew seat covers for the passenger seat in the car that had famous people on them so they could drive in the carpool lane. Like, I'm the most law-abiding person in the world. I'm like, why would I want to have somebody cheat in the carpool lane? I don't know. But, oh gosh, sorry, that's the side of me I probably don't want people to know about. But when I went to my bedroom to get ready, I remember the look on his face and I'm like, oh, I know what this is. It's hypomania. And it can wait. Like, if it's still important in a few days, we can work on it. Do the kids need to know everything today? They don't. And so because I had learned those skills from that book, I was able to make better decisions. So just to wrap it all up, if you guys, I'm sure you're probably already doing a lot of this, if you help prepare them for the hospital so it's not such a scary place, and when they come out, they don't feel worse than they went in because they feel like everything is just so overwhelming. And then to help them understand their diagnosis so they can self-advocate and recognize, yeah, I'm feeling manic, and if you feel like I hate you right now, I really don't. I just know that I'm kind of going to a little manic phase. And we do have those discussions. He's like, you want me to go downstairs and watch John Wayne? Like,
And she does say that. Says, I hate you today.
No,
so
I don't.
Just understand.
No, I don't. I say, if you feel like I hate you. No, I disagree with that. But by understanding my bipolar, I can be more functional in my life, and I can not affect the people around me so much. And then helping them be independent with a plan that works for them, so that they don't feel like their only options are just therapy and medication, and if that doesn't work, there's no way they can do this. There's a lot of things that they can do. I appreciate your time and listening to me, Doran, or whatever.
I think the other thing to look at is one of the biggest fears with our safety plans or wellness plans is we don't want to be a burden on certain people. So literally having people being able to go activities. Walmart's open 24/7, so it doesn't matter what time of night, day, you can go take a walk through Walmart. It may be a wild scene that you see at Walmart, but it's getting you out of the environment and changing what's going on. So I think part of it is stopping to think of realistically as we do some of these wellness plans or safety plans with clients, that we broaden our view of what's there. Because she's opened my eyes on what a safety plan or wellness plan really can be and how it can be influencing that they're not having to be dependent on somebody else. Because that's the worst thing that I really learned is they want to be independent. They want to be able to do things and feel that they can go do things. And how do they do it and make it work and not be a burden to anybody? And so sometimes we need to stop and really use that safety plan as a way of teaching and helping them to understand how they work with their diagnosis and how they work with their environment. So they really know the goal is to be independent. There are backup people, but the goal is to be independent that's there. And sometimes we rush too quickly through those safety plans and give me 3 people. The question is, do we really know the 3 people? You work with the teenagers, I would hope you ask, have you met them? Face to face, not through the internet, not through Facebook or something else. Have you been to their house? What's their last name? Do they really know the individual? And would they ever even call or contact them? So just some different ways to think about it as you go through this process.
That's it. If you have any, for those of you that want to go, you can go. If you have questions, you can just, I don't know if there's anything you have questions about, other than, I know this is my plan, but if for some reason you want a copy of it because you want to get some ideas from it, I can email it to him and then he can share it. So, thank you so much.